I am very honored to participate in this meeting, particularly in a panel with you and Dr. Chandra that is good and old friend. The topic is very timely. I will talk about some issues that you raised, and I hope we can cover those who will not, that I will not talk in my preliminary talks in question and answer. President Trump was an exceptional president in US history. Then from a broad perspective, one may conclude that the presidential election in US reflects a serious contest between multilateralism and unilateralism. Multilateralism as an approach which seeks for common grounds, while unilateralism activates fault lines and focuses on differences and turns them into conflicts. This approach has damaging outcome for international relations and even domestic affairs. Coronavirus, as a dreadful challenge to all nations, can be regarded as a blunt example. Instead of scientific cooperation in finding best practice for treatment and invention of vaccine, Trump firstly denied the gravity of the disease and later blamed China and even WHO. And he finally walked away from WHO, and then that was the time that he went out of WHO was so critical for the necessity for cooperation and finding solutions. This vicious circle in US policy is traceable in majority of global affairs. On JCPOA as an example was the best pattern for multilateral negotiations and thus received the unanimous support of the Security Council. But US withdrawal and breaking the law, the rule of law, exposes the short-sighted and ill-intended unilateral action. Behind this was America First motto. For the first time in UN history, a permanent member of the Security Council is sanctioning those states and companies that are implementing the Security Council Resolution 2231. Yes, Trump walked away from the JCPOA, but the resolution is there, and the resolution by Security Council is obligatory for all members. And then in that resolution, it says that a normal relationship, normal economic relationship, trade, investment with Iran should be encouraged, while US is sanctioning those who would have this normal relationship with Iran. This is for the first time in UN history that US is, a permanent member is sanctioning those who are implementing the Security Council resolution, not who are violating that. This is very new phenomenon. Trumpism maybe. For the first time in Security Council, a permanent member introduced a draft resolution about 3 months to restrict Iran defense capability. That draft got only 1 vote. US is doing this while it is selling the most advanced weapons to the region. And also this was for the first time that a permanent member introduced a draft resolution and only received 1 vote. Again, for the first time in US, US claimed that previous sanctions resolutions have been reimposed by US, while 13 other members of Security Council have officially declared that US by no means is in a position to do that. In this way, America became first in Trump's exceptional and unilateral policy. Indeed, America first soon became America only and then turned into Trump only. Now, the post-election era necessitates a substantive U-turn in US international policy, moving from unilateralism to multilateral one. This is an international necessity. But what happened during the election? We have Trump and also we have Trumpism. In spite of participation of more than 174 million in this election and 6 million margin between the contenders, still one should not overlook the fact that the unprecedented reactivation of major social fault lines in American society would impose grave negative impact on the US policy. It is very unprecedented that such fault lines in American society being activated, and also its impact on foreign policy is clear. Indeed, the competition was on less than 100,000 votes in swing states. Thus, such a close and breathtaking competition was so small and volatile, so unpredictable, and based on local considerations. Trump's America First was a clear confrontation with the global community through threat, intimidation, and sanction. Domestically, such a policy led to extreme populism, flaming discrimination, hatred, violence, and racism, particularly on Muslim inside America, against Muslim in America. In this way, Trump activated marginalized, violent, and even armed groups to deal with social challenges and introduce himself as the savior. Now, if he concedes, Trump's era has come to end, but Trumpism is not. He got 11 million votes more than his previous election. This fact is alarming, and itself, this means the enforcement of unilateralism, extremism, populism, and xenophobia. Thus, President Trump, President-elect Biden, is seriously facing with old as well as new challenges, domestically and internationally. It should be said that domestic policy is much more important now for Biden because of the situation that this election has caused. But we don't want to talk about domestic politics inside America. I move to foreign policy. In foreign policy, reversing American foreign approach and return to global community, these are, I think, Biden's priority in foreign policy. Reconstruction of transatlantic relations and extending hands for cooperation and coordination with US allies, strengthening relations between US and traditional allies, Europe, Asia, particularly in COVID coordination. Return to Paris Agreement, WHO, and some other international obligations. But what about Trump? Didn't only quarrel with hostile nations, as he called them, but also with their allies, and many problems, difficulties created because of that. But what about the big superpower, big powers, China and Russia? I think Biden would replace Russia with China and take a stricter policy on Russia in short term. Democrats believe that Trump was so lenient towards Russia. But in long term, China's economic and technological advancement would pose more serious challenges. For this purpose, new administration would create a united front against China, not only on trade, but on various challenging fields such as stealing technology, as they call it, and subsidizing goods, and so on and so forth. The list between US and China is long. On regional issue, I would refer to some points. COVID impact on the region has been far-reaching. The region is much weaker now than it was 2016. They cannot come back. Construction and business have drastically declined in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and many countries in our region. From a strategic point of view, for Biden, Middle East will be a lesser significant because oil is not that important that it was, for example, 10 years ago. Now America is somehow exporting oils and competing with countries in our region. Endless war, nobody in America wanted to continue this endless war, as Trump called it, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen. Thus, America would not engage in problem solving or a state-making process. Then they would solve, these countries in the region would solve their problem by themselves. They will not engage because they fail to do anything positive here. Middle East is no longer under regime change policy. I think this is my understanding. Regime change, it was a failed approach, but reviving diplomacy in dealing with regional problems such as the situation in Yemen and reviewing policy towards Saudi, these are things that would happen. But it was total failure, their intervention in Saudi and also their support in Syria and their support of Saudis in dealing with Yemen issues. A strong reservation on Saudi Arabia and taking a balanced policy in a comprehensive way, not just focusing on selling arms and buying oil. This would not be the case anymore, I mean, relatively speaking, I'm just in comparison. Some advisors to Biden regard Turkey as the most dangerous player in the Middle East now. Why? Because they think Turkey now is not predictable. For Biden, a kind of balance of power should be maintained. Thus, Turkey, Iran, Saudi will be balanced by each other. In Biden's foreign policy team, Turkey is more interventionist and unpredictable. Therefore, pressure on Turkey will increase in order to bring it back on track, as US call it. On Iran, shifting from maximum pressure policy to pressure, interaction, and negotiation. Pressure against Iran will continue, but this maximum pressure policy is unprecedented and has caused a lot for Iranian people because of particularly during this COVID situation. Pompeo's destructive approach toward Iran that wrongfully depicted Iran as the single vital threat to the region was doomed to failure. I mean, he wanted to say that He was always repeating that there is only one problem in the Middle East, and it is Iran. And if we contain Iran and if we attack Iran, then everything will be solved. And this was wrong, and this was a big lie. US policy in Biden administration will not focus on Iran only, but as I mentioned, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, UAE, and others. Return to JCPOA put the military option out of the table, and it would remove sanctions and reduce tensions with Iran. These are some speculation because of the reports that are taking position by Biden team. JCPOA is a multilateral, lengthy and intensively negotiated deal based on a long-term commitment by all parties involved as well as the world community. Islamic Republic of Iran has verifiably implemented all its obligations while has been deprived of its rights by US ill-intended and wrongful policy. The new administration, as promised, should immediately and unconditionally return to its commitment and reject and undo all sanctions imposed on Iran and other countries, companies, as well as individuals. Iran accordingly will take measures to return to her obligations in close cooperation with IAEA. Some inside America may claim that JCPOA was not adopted by US Congress, then it is not legally binding at domestic level. This is not correct because one may argue that Resolution 2231 is a legally binding document by Security Council, and America, as a permanent member of Security Council, bears even more responsibility to implement such a resolution. These are main ideas that I wanted to share with you. In conclusion, I would add two to three other sentences. US strategic interest, responding to your question, the main question of this webinar, US strategic interests will remain the same, but at tactical level, diplomacy and interaction will take priority. And long-term interests, as opposed to short interests, short-term and narrow-minded one, will take precedence. This is one point. The other point is soft power and rule of law will be used or misused if necessary in different situations. Occupation of Palestine, Palestinian territory, and suffering of its people will continue, and US will remain committed to shameful support of Israel, atrocities and brutality. Love story between Kushner and Ben Salman and Netanyahu may change. Figure would go, but long-term associations will remain solid. And US negative interference in the Middle East because of Israel would continue, but maybe in another way. But generally, as I said, the Middle East has lost its importance for US, and the issue of China and countries around China would attract more attention. And maybe the new challenge would be between China and US because of the advancement and because of the power of China in technology and other areas. I would stop here, and I'm very thankful to all of you.